Hello people of the internet. So this video is a long time coming. Over the past 2 years, I've spent a lot of time playing this game, devouring all the content I could find on it, expressing my thoughts in countless Reddit posts, buying merch, listening to what other people have to say on it, particularly people of color, admonishing racist opinions, penning my own 200k word fanfic to continue the story. You get the picture. But before I get into it, I should note that this is my first ever video essay, so I do apologize if it sucks. However, if you do value what I have to say and think I did a good job, please hit the like and subscribe buttons, as it does help my channel grow. Now without further ado, here are my thoughts on this absolute masterpiece of a game, Life is Strange 2. For the longest time, I have been debating on what I can say about this game to add to the conversation that others so far haven't, because there are quite a few brilliant analysis breakdowns of the game already out there. Everything is Political by GameAssist and Let's Talk About Life is Strange 2 by Asmara highlight a lot of points more succinctly than I could ever hope to do. So in some ways, I have to wonder if my opinions as a white, cis male, gay man are even valid, and yet I keep coming back to Life is Strange 2 time and time again because I'm so enraptured by the story and politics of it, and I honestly believe it's one of the most important games of my lifetime. In this video, I'll be breaking down some scenes, discussing the major themes of racism, complicated family dynamics, homelessness, police brutality, politics, religion, classism, and how all of these elements play into each other and affect the many situations the characters find themselves in. The game centers around Sean and Daniel Diaz, two half-Mexican, half-white brothers who have up until now lived a relatively comfortable lower middle-class life. Their father Esteban is a first-generation Mexican immigrant who works as an auto mechanic. Their white mother, Karen, abandoned the family some time ago to pursue her artistic interests. It starts off with Sean planning for a Halloween party with his best friend Lila, a Korean American who struggles with mental health issues and fears for Sean's safety given the political climate of 2016 following Donald Trump's election. While the two share subtle jokes about the border wall, for now at least they try to view it as background noise. This all soon changes, however. After Sean ignores his brother's request to play, preferring to focus on living a normal teenage life free of family distractions, Daniel wanders outside dejected, where an incident occurs with their neighbor Brett. If you'd explored everything in the Diaz house up until now, you'll know their neighbors are openly racist Trump supporters who frequently send letters threatening to call the cops on them for simple things like playing over their property line, or Esteban throwing a weekend barbecue parties with music that's supposedly too loud. Sean gets into a fight with Brett to defend his brother after Brett uses the classic line, "Go back to your own country." This fight goes on until Brett is knocked unconscious and falls onto a rock, at which point a cop conveniently shows up, and Sean can no longer ignore the socio-political impacts of racial profiling and police brutality on his life, because it's no longer background noise to him. They're now a stark reality that will follow him everywhere he goes, which perfectly illustrates how people of color in the United States are frequently one split hair away from having their entire lives upended. In a single moment, everything Sean's father has worked so hard to achieve for the Diaz family is ripped away as the trigger-happy cop overreacts to this situation and kills Esteban. It is at this moment that Daniel's telekinetic powers are triggered for the first time, sending the cop and his squad car flying across the street. Sean blacks out and wakes up to see half the block decimated, his father dead, and the sound of approaching sirens in the distance. In a moment of panic, he grabs the unconscious Daniel and flees the scene. Now, I've heard many conservative gamers raise the point that if Sean had simply stayed, he could have explained the situation to the cops. But this view negates the fact that Sean literally just witnessed his father gunned down by a corrupt police officer who refused to hear him out regarding the fight with Brett. If the truth already wasn't on his side to begin with, why would he have any reason to believe it's safe to try again? We also have to measure the mindset of a teenager like Sean, considering the unique socio-political climate of 2016. With all the media focus on Donald Trump and his supporters, not to mention the well-documented increase in racially motivated attacks by white supremacists who felt emboldened by his rhetoric, chants of Build the Wall, and constant media coverage on police brutality and the BLM movement, we can safely assume Sean already didn't feel safe where he was as a person of color. The only thing sheltering him from the storm of the outside world as a second-generation Latino in America was his father, and he just lost that security blanket. It's also worth noting that most teenagers tend to be impulsive and reactionary in their decision making, so given that Sean is just 16 years old, it makes perfect sense why he'd make the split-second decision to go on the run with his brother Daniel, the only form of family he has left. Obviously, he doesn't want to lose that. As you progress through the game, Sean finds himself forced into a surrogate father role in taking care of Daniel, bonding with him, encouraging him to make the right choices, and ultimately training him how to be responsible with his newfound power. And this Daniel learns through a combination of not only just listening to Sean, but also watching his actions. Again, I've heard many conservative players complain that Daniel constantly undermines Sean and does his own thing, and while this is certainly true in some parts as the story necessitates, much of it is also based on the decisions you make as a player along the way. So if Daniel witnesses you lying, he'll lie too. If he sees you stealing, he'll also steal. This was an aspect of the game I felt was done incredibly well, and is very true to life, because all children learn through observation of their parental figures and older siblings, for better or worse. The game also portrays quite effectively how white-centered media often informs public perception of things like homelessness, racism, and accusations of criminal behavior when it comes to people of color, and this brings me to my next point. Your first encounter with this manner of perception occurs at a gas station on the road. When you first enter the lot, you'll see a family on the left eating food at a nearby picnic table. You can either send Daniel to beg for food, in which he's successful, or you can approach the family yourself, in which case you're only successful if you choose your words carefully. But the family might seem suspicious of you regardless, depending on whether or not you chose to enter the bathroom to wash up first. There are actually a few instances of bathrooms you can wash up in throughout the game before you enter a given area, which will immediately affect how people perceive you. This is because homelessness is associated with being dirty, and this tends to go double and triple for people of color, who are often forced into presenting the best first impression they possibly can to appear non-threatening, and thereby avoid any racist perceptions they might be faced with when encountering white people. So the more you wash up, the more people will react favorably to your presence. Obviously, this is xenophobic bullshit, but it's a very subtle form of racism that often goes overlooked in US culture. As you shop, you have the option of either buying the items with what money you have, or getting Daniel to distract Doris while you steal. And while stealing in this case is certainly justifiable for survival, you also have to consider the long-term impact on Daniel's behavior. Then there's the more overt form of racism, which comes in the form of Hank Stamper, Doris' husband, who approaches you as you eat. He attacks Sean and locks him in his office. This he justifies by having seen Sean and Daniel branded as fugitives in a local paper, one you can see if you took a look at the stand outside the gas station before entering. The boys are front-page news. So basically, Hank has made what's considered a citizen's arrest, a form of vigilantism whereby if someone enters your private property illegally, you have the right to detain them on your own until police arrive, provided you have probable cause to believe they're a threat. But that's the thing. Sean and Daniel did not enter private property illegally, nor did they act threatening. Hell, they don't even steal anything from the gas station if you made that choice. They're being pursued for questioning, yet the media chose to spin it as a manhunt, which goes back to what I was saying about white-centered media affecting public perception of minorities. Hank uses that perception and his ignorance of the facts to justify his racist actions, because in the US, you're always guilty until proven innocent. And that's a major issue I feel everyone should have when it comes to the media in America. When someone is arrested, and before charges are even formally filed, we parade the accused around in front of the press as if they're already a public pariah. The media latches onto a story and spins it their own way, which directly affects whether or not the public views them as guilty or innocent. And this becomes a huge problem when jurors are called in to level a verdict, because when they walk into the courtroom, guess what? They're already biased. Then there's the fact Sean and Daniel are homeless, and this is something racists use to justify their actions too. Because if you're homeless, society doesn't exactly come to your defense most of the time, and you don't have the same protections as everyone else. You're viewed as an expendable leech of this system with literally nothing to contribute, much less protect you. So what's to stop a racist from beating or even killing someone society doesn't care about? After all, no one's going to miss them, right? This is another issue I have with conservative reviewers who claim the racist attacks portrayed in the game are unrealistic in terms of frequency and severity. They're definitely not, and there's plenty of documented evidence that this sort of thing happens all the time. Given Sean and Daniel's status as homeless people of color, branded as fugitives by the media, not to mention the alt-right politics of 2016 that already pitted the public against people like them, that's pretty much all the ammunition and justification a racist needs to enact merciless violence. After Daniel helps Sean escape the back office of the station, the boys run into Brody, the blogger they previously met at the convenience store, who is sympathetic to their situation and offers compassion while driving them south. While I do like and appreciate Brody as a character, there are some things he says to Sean that come off as ignorant and problematic. When Sean tries to talk about the attack, he's shut down with, "Don't think about it and don't talk about it. Don't let it faze you, little dude. Yeah, don't let the fact that a racist just tied you up and beat the hell out of you get you down, right?" I mean, sure, Brody's a nice guy, but that's really not a smart or compassionate thing to say in that kind of situation. But then again, you can't really fault him entirely for his ignorance. He does say that he came from a rich family, and wealthy white people tend to not want to acknowledge that racial problems still exist, so he probably doesn't exactly have much experience with the people he's trying to defend, which is pretty common of rich white college kids who are newly exposed to perceptions outside their safe little bubble. That's another issue I have with white leftists in particular. Like, even myself, I think we tend to be a little ignorant still and not mindful of our own privilege and biases when we try to speak up for people of color. So there's a lot of times when we might say the wrong thing, but that's something I try to be more cognizant of. Like, I just feel we get so passionate about equal rights that there are times where it's more tempting to speak rather than actively listen to the people we're trying to support. Anyway, to jump ahead, Brody encourages Sean to tell the truth to Daniel, who's still unaware their dad's dead because he was unconscious when it happened. From a psychological standpoint, and speaking from experience here, avoidance of the issue is never the route you want to take because prolonging the truth only exacerbates the pain when it comes out. Brody then drives Sean and Daniel to a motel and gets them a room. At this point, if you stole from the gas station, you'll see the impact on Daniel's behavior if you check out the toy on the nightstand he stole from Brody. But in trying to explain why your own stealing is justified, you pretty much can't, because how do you describe to a 9-year-old the difference between necessary and unnecessary criminal acts? If it's for your survival and your life depends on it, sure, stealing may be illegal, but it's certainly not immoral, and this is the first instance in the game that perfectly illustrates how the rules for Sean and Daniel have changed, because they're no longer a part of society. So basically, there's no safe middle ground anymore, where loyalty to society and loyalty to brotherhood are equally balanced. That's only possible if they're living a safe, comfortable, sheltered life, and obviously they aren't anymore. The Diaz brothers have to depend on each other with very little adult input, so every decision you make in the game is skewed one way or another toward morality or brotherhood, and these decisions are weighed at the end of every episode. Honestly, I think that brilliantly illustrates just how impossible these choices would be in real life, as well as the conflict going on in Sean's mind. These boys just lost their home and the only family they ever knew. That was what connected them to the rest of society, and on top of that, you're also dealing with Daniel's power, so it makes sense that most decisions Sean faces would cause a great deal of cognitive dissonance. None of these choices are easy, and it's even harder to foresee the impact they'll have further down the line, which is something I appreciate so much about this game. The first choice is shown when you have the option of whether or not to call Lila at the motel. On the one hand, you want to keep that connection as a friend because you care about her, but what if the cops are tapping the lines? It's not safe, and Brody even tells you earlier to toss your phone. Ultimately, that's what Sean does. But based on whether or not you called Lila, it impacts a later communication opportunity when you're staying with Sean and Daniel's grandparents. Moving along to telling the truth too late, making things worse, Sean steps out to grab Daniel a drink. Daniel sees a news report on the TV showing their father was killed and explodes at Sean, who tries to defend his reasons for running. Ultimately, it comes out a little jumbled because, again, how do you explain to a kid why you made a choice he's not going to fully understand at his age? Still, Sean can either promise to tell the truth next time or do his best to tell the truth, which has an impact in episode 2 when Daniel needs to tell the truth about something. The two make up and Sean tells Daniel he'll always be there to take care of him. The boys then leave on a bus into the sunrise bound for Eugene, Oregon, and this is honestly one of my favorite scenes in the entire game that's just so beautiful and heartfelt. All the cinematic choices combined with the exquisite musical talents of the game's composer, Jonathan Morelli, make this a super impactful scene while Sean tells the story of the Wolf brothers to Daniel, a fairy tale he creates to comfort his little brother along various points in the game. The story is then retold at the beginning of each chapter to the player. I thought it was a brilliant narrative choice that not only highlights the importance of spirit animals, which are tied to every Life is Strange protagonist, but also the fact that the developers painted the Diaz brothers as wolves felt very much culturally significant. In European folklore, wolves were regarded as savage animals, tricksters, wolves in sheep's clothing, an animal to be feared for its ruthlessness. But in Aztec folklore, an ethnic group whose descendants became Mexicans, wolves were believed to help guide fallen warriors across the river to the afterlife, a myth that perfectly describes the Diaz brothers as they traveled to Puerto Lobos, literally the port of wolves in Spanish, which is their father's homeland. Also, in reality, wolves will only attack when their family or territory is threatened by an outside force. This, in addition to viewing the police as hunters who want to capture and tie them up, perfectly illustrates Sean and Daniel's plight. And that concludes my thoughts for part 1 of this video essay. Again, I apologize if this has been terrible in any way, but if you do value what I have to say, please like and subscribe to my channel. I'm not sure exactly when I will be done with part 2, but I have it all recorded and I just need to edit it, so it might be about a couple weeks or so. But I hope you stick around, and thank you if you've listened this far.